Gymnastics is a breathtaking blend of strength, grace, and fearless ambition, but behind the beauty lies real danger. Beneath every flawless routine is a world of intense pressure, brutal training, and the constant threat of injury. In rare and heartbreaking cases, the pursuit of perfection has ended in unimaginable loss. Today, we're looking at 5 of the most terrifying gymnastic deaths. Stories that shock the world and stand as chilling reminders of the risks these athletes face every time they step onto the mat. Elena Mukina was more than just a gymnast. She was a revelation, a force of nature in Soviet gymnastics. She defied gravity with every routine and seemed destined to redefine the sport itself. At just 18, she did the unthinkable, captured the all-around gold at the 1978 World Championships, toppling titans like Nadia Comaneci and Nellie Kim. The audience was stunned. Coaches around the world took notice, but behind every shining moment was a storm quietly building. In 1979, everything changed. A fractured leg sidelined Elena, just as the Soviet Union prepared to host the 1980 Moscow Olympics. For a nation obsessed with dominance and perfection, her absence from the podium was unacceptable. The pressure mounted. There was no time for full healing, no room for fear. Coaches, officials, her own trainer, Mikhail Klemenko, pushed her relentlessly. He wasn't nurturing a star, he was building a machine. She would later say she felt more like a living robot than a person. And then came the day that shattered everything. It was July 3rd, 1980. The Olympic Games were just 2 weeks away. Elena was drilling a move she had begged not to perform, the Thomas Salto, a tumbling skill infamous for its danger. It involved a full, twisting back somersault in a tucked position, a maneuver that even seasoned male gymnasts hesitated to attempt. She had warned her coach again and again. She wasn't ready. Something didn't feel right. But her voice was drowned out by ambition. That afternoon, as she hurled herself down the tumbling pass, everything went wrong in a heartbeat. She under-rotated. Her body pitched forward mid-air, and then impact. Her chin struck the mat with violent force, and her neck snapped instantly. In one brutal second, Elena Mukina was paralyzed from the neck down. Gone was the girl who had once defied physics. Now she was trapped in a motionless body. The very sport that had once made her a star, now her prison. The response was colder than anyone could have imagined. The Soviet Union, faced with the embarrassment of a fallen national hero just before their shining Olympic moment, chose silence over compassion. They issued conflicting reports. They claimed Elena had disobeyed coaching orders, that she had tried the move on her own. They blamed her. Even the president of the International Gymnastics Federation parroted the lies, saying she was simply too old to compete again. She was 20. But the truth was undeniable and unspeakably cruel. Her life became one of near-complete isolation. Friends stopped visiting. Her grandmother became her only caregiver. The walls closed in. Gymnastics, once her identity, became her torment. In the few interviews she gave, Elena's voice was hauntingly clear. She spoke of the unbearable pressure, the manipulation, the fear, and most chilling of all, she recalled the moment of her accident, not with horror, but with a kind of exhausted relief. Thank God, she had thought. I won't be going to the Olympics. That was the depth of her despair. Even those who once stood beside her couldn't shake the memory. Nellie Kim, her teammate and once her rival, admitted the tragedy haunted her through the Moscow Games. It helped drive her into early retirement. The Thomas Salto, the move that ended Elena's career and stole her body, became a symbol of everything that was wrong with the sport, of what happens when medals matter more than the people who win them. Though the Soviet Federation tried to erase her, Elena's story refused to be silenced. Years later, she was awarded honors. On December 22, 2006, Elena Mukina died from complications related to her injury. She was only 46. Her fall didn't just paralyze her, it exposed a system built on silence, pressure, and sacrifice. Jalisa Gomez had a spark that couldn't be ignored. Graceful, powerful, and fiercely determined, she rose from humble beginnings in San Antonio, Texas. Her parents, once migrant farm workers, watched with pride as their daughter chased something bigger than anyone in their family had dared to dream. By 14, Jalisa had earned her place among America's elite gymnasts. She wasn't just good, she was breathtaking. Coaches whispered her name as a sure bet for the 1988 Olympic Games. But talent in gymnastics has a dark companion, risk, and Jalisa was heading straight into it. Behind the elegant routines was a mounting concern. Jalisa had long struggled with one particular skill, the Yurchenko vault. It's one of the sport's most punishing moves, requiring a round-off onto the springboard, a back handspring onto the vaulting table, and then a blind twisting somersault in midair. If anything goes wrong, the consequences are devastating. Her form on it was inconsistent. Coaches noticed, teammates noticed. Even her former trainer, Bella Caroli, raised red flags. Fellow gymnast Chell Stack later said, "You could tell it was not a safe vault for her to be doing. Someone should have stopped her, but no one did." Her coach at the time, Al Fong, kept pushing for perfection. In elite gymnastics, high difficulty means high scores, and scores meant Olympic dreams. On May 5, 1988, at the World Sports Fair in Tokyo, Jalisa was preparing to compete. Everything seemed routine, until it wasn't. During warm-ups, she sprinted down the runway for the Yurchenko. Her foot slipped. She didn't get the height she needed. Instead of flipping into her rotation, she crashed headfirst into the vaulting horse. Her neck snapped, her body collapsed. In one horrifying second, Jalisa was paralyzed from the neck down. She was rushed to a Tokyo hospital, conscious but unable to move, communicating only by blinking. Her parents arrived, devastated but hopeful. Then tragedy struck again. Jalisa was accidentally disconnected from her ventilator. Oxygen deprivation caused severe brain damage. She slipped into a coma and never woke up. After 3 years in a vegetative state, Jalisa passed away in 1991. She was just 18. Her death sent shockwaves through the gymnastics world. There had been warnings. There had been chances to stop this, and no one acted. But Jalisa's tragedy wasn't forgotten. In 1989, the International Gymnastics Federation began allowing padded U-shaped mats during vaults, previously used only in practice. By 2006, attempting a Yurchenko without one resulted in an automatic zero. The vaulting horse itself was redesigned into a wider, more stable table to prevent the kind of slip that ended Jalisa's life. Her death forced the sport to confront its silence. It exposed the danger of placing ambition above safety. Her coach, Al Fong, later admitted he sat alone in his Tokyo hotel room after the accident, asking himself, is it worth risking someone's life for a life-risking skill? For Jalisa, the answer came too late. But for thousands of gymnasts who followed, it changed everything. Safety became a priority. Christy Henrik was a spark in motion, small in size but impossible to overlook. Standing just 4'10" inches and weighing 93 pounds, she earned the nickname E.T., not for being otherworldly, but for being extra tough. With explosive strength and razor-sharp precision, she wasn't just a gymnast, she was a force. In the late 1980s, she was one of America's brightest rising stars, a fixture on the national team, and a hair's breadth, just 0.0188 points, from making the 1988 Olympic squad. She lived for the sport, and the sport, for a time, loved her back. But the admiration came with a price tag, a silent one that would eventually take everything. It didn't start with a fall or a bad dismount. It started with a sentence, one that didn't even come from a coach. At an international meet in 1988, a judge made an offhand comment. She needs to lose weight. Just a few words. But in a world where appearance is performance, where thinness is discipline and control, that remark sunk deep. That night, Christy pulled her coach, Al Fong, aside in their hotel room. "Am I fat?" she asked. He told her no, but it didn't matter. The seed had been planted. From that moment, she began to unravel, quietly, invisibly. She turned to restriction. Apples, lettuce, just enough to survive practices, not enough to nourish a body. Then came the purging. Laxatives hidden in her suitcase, secret binges, shame masked by relentless training. She began to run obsessively, even when her body begged for rest. Her fiancé, Bo Moreno, watched her avoid meals entirely, refusing to eat in front of him. Her decline was painful but precise, an athlete directing her discipline inward, punishing herself for not being enough. Doctors tried. They hospitalized her. At one point, they confined her to a wheelchair just to stop her from burning more calories. Her gums bled. Her kidneys were failing. IV lines were torn out because she believed sugar water would make her gain weight. Her body was falling apart, but Christy kept fighting. When she broke a vertebra in 1989, she returned just 3 months later to take second at nationals. Her pain tolerance was mythic, but the torment inside that no one saw. By the early 90s, her body began to betray her. She couldn't finish routines. Her performances broke down. She pulled out mid-competition, erratic and exhausted. Retirement followed, but the disease didn't retire with her. It stayed and worsened. Therapy came in fragments. Sometimes she resisted. Sometimes she opened up. In one session, she admitted the truth. Her illness wasn't just about food. It was about shame, control, and the crushing fear that she'd never be good enough. On July 26, 1994, the gymnast who once lit up arenas died in a hospital bed. Christy was just 22 years old. She weighed less than 60 pounds. Her organs had failed. Her body couldn't take anymore. The girl who had once flipped across balance beams with terrifying ease had been consumed by a disorder that no one could see until it was too late. Her death hit the gymnastics world like a tidal wave. For years, the aesthetic pressure had been there, quiet, unspoken, brutal, and Christy became its most devastating consequence. Olympic legend Kathy Rigby, who had battled eating disorders herself, put it bluntly, "You don't want to believe something like this can still happen with all we know." But it had happened, and it couldn't be ignored. Conversations followed. Painful ones. The U.S. Gymnastics Federation began holding seminars. Coaches were told to look for signs. Parents were urged to intervene. But behind every attempt at reform, one question lingered. Why wasn't it enough to save Christy? Why didn't anyone see what was happening before it was too late? After her death, her bright red Toyota sat in silence outside her family home. Its custom license plate read GMNAST, a title she once wore with pride. Now it was a ghost of what she had given and what had been taken. Samantha Kerio was the kind of athlete who made you believe in balance, of body, mind, and purpose. A senior at Auburn University, she wasn't just a gymnast, she was a scholar, an engineer, a perfectionist. While some chased fame, Samantha chased the stars, literally. She had a job offer from Boeing and was close to finishing her aerospace engineering degree. On the mat, she moved with elegance and precision. Off it, she was the picture of discipline and humility. Her teammates admired her. Her coaches trusted her. The future was hers to command. And then, in one brutal second, everything changed. April 5th, 2019, NCAA Regional Semifinals in Baton Rouge. It was meant to be one of her final competitive performances, one more chance to help Auburn push ahead. The arena buzzed with energy. Music, cheers, chalk dust, routine warm-ups, nothing unusual. Samantha stepped onto the floor with her usual quiet focus. Her routine was a final love letter to the sport she'd given 18 years of her life. Then came the tumbling pass, the double front flip, and then the sound, a sickening collapse. She had under-rotated by a split second, just enough for disaster. Upon landing, both knees gave way. She crumpled to the floor, screaming, legs twisted, tendons torn, knees dislocated. The music stopped. The crowd froze. You could feel the breath leave the room. Medical staff rushed in. She was still conscious, but in unimaginable pain. Within hours, it was everywhere. Cell phone footage spread like wildfire. Millions of views, comments, replays, strangers dissecting the worst moment of her life. Samantha watched in horror, not just because of the injury, but the world's reaction. "My pain is not your entertainment," she tweeted. Later, she told Today, "You kind of want to watch it just to see what happens, but you don't think about the people that it could impact." She became the face of a new kind of strength, not in sticking the landing, but in refusing to let pain become spectacle. Samantha had spent nearly 2 decades perfecting routines, but her greatest act of courage was reclaiming her dignity. Days later, she posted on Instagram, "I am hanging up my grips and leaving the chalk behind." Her body was broken, but her voice was firm. Gymnastics was over, but she was not. Her next goal? Walk down the aisle at her wedding on her own feet. Through multiple surgeries and months of brutal therapy, she fought back. She didn't just walk down that aisle. She smiled through every step. Her story didn't end with retirement. It sparked reflection. Why were dangerous routines like the one that ended Samantha's career still being rewarded? Why weren't better safety measures in place? Coach Jeff Graba later called that night one of the toughest of my life. But Samantha's poise became a guidepost. She reminded the world that grace isn't only about what happens in the air, it's how you rise when everything falls. Melanie Coleman wasn't just a gymnast. She was the kind of person who made you believe in goodness. She carried herself with grace, not just on the mat, but in every room she entered. A junior at Southern Connecticut State University, Melanie was the kind of student-athlete every coach dreams of. An all-state gymnast, a high school MVP, an All-America scholar-athlete recognized by USA Gymnastics. But titles barely scratched the surface. She was a nursing student, a youth coach, a beloved teammate, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. She had big dreams, and more importantly, the heart to carry them. On November 8, 2019, Melanie walked into New Era Gymnastics in Hamden, Connecticut. a place that felt more like home than a training facility. She'd practiced there for years. That day was supposed to be like any other. It wasn't a competition, it wasn't a high-pressure moment, just a routine training session, just another day in the pursuit of excellence. But then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Melanie was working on the uneven bars, not an unfamiliar skill, not an experimental routine, just one more rep in a life full of them. Then, something went wrong. She lost her grip, mid-swing, mid-flight, and she fell. There was no dramatic buildup, no warning, just a sickening, sudden silence. She landed hard. The impact caused a catastrophic spinal cord injury. Coaches immediately rushed to her side, performing CPR as they waited for the ambulance. She was rushed to Yale New Haven Hospital, where doctors did everything they could. But the damage was too great. 2 days later, on November 10th, Melanie Coleman, so full of light, so full of life, was gone. She was just 20 years old. The news rippled outward in shockwaves. Fatal accidents in gymnastics, especially during training, are heartbreakingly rare. The uneven bars, with their beauty and brutality, demand absolute precision. One miscalculation, one slipped grip, and the consequences can be irreversible. For Melanie, it was. Her team was shattered. Her coaches devastated. Head coach Mary Fredericks called her a sweet-spirited young woman and an incredibly hard worker. SCSU's athletic director Jay Moran described her loss as simply devastating. The owner of New Era Gymnastics, who had coached her for nearly a decade, said it was a tragic accident, unexpected and heartbreaking. But no one could find the right words, because there weren't any. What followed was an outpouring of love and sorrow. A GoFundMe page set up to support Melanie's family raised more than $32,000 in a matter of days. A meal train was launched by friends and neighbors. Community members, strangers from across the country, and fellow athletes reached out to offer condolences. Her story gripped the hearts of thousands. The ache of her loss stretched far beyond her hometown. And yet, even in grief, Melanie's life began to shine a different kind of light. Her death sparked difficult, necessary conversations. Even though her school confirmed all safety protocols had been followed, and the gym had a clean safety record, the gymnastics world paused. Why did this happen? Could it happen again? What needs to change? Advocates called for a renewed focus on injury prevention, stronger emergency readiness, better padding, more certified medical personnel at every practice, not just competitions. Because as Melanie's story made heartbreakingly clear, tragedy doesn't wait for the spotlight. It can strike anywhere, at any moment, even during a quiet training day. More than protocols, Melanie's death stirred something deeper. It exposed the razor-thin line gymnast's walk, the unrelenting push to be perfect, to stay strong, to ignore pain and risk in pursuit of scores, titles, and praise. The culture that celebrates victory must also be the one that safeguards the athlete. And in that shift, Melanie's voice, though stilled, still speaks. Her family, determined not to let her light fade, established scholarships for student athletes in her name. Her passion for sport and learning will continue to touch lives long after the headlines fade. In locker rooms, in boardrooms, in safety reform meetings, her name now holds weight. Her story is a reminder, a gymnast, a role model, and a life lived with heart. Melanie Coleman is remembered not for how she fell, but for how deeply she was loved, and how profoundly she continues to move the world she left behind.